The alarm screamed its metallic shriek through the firehouse, slicing through the low hum of early morning routine. Firefighters bolted upright, adrenaline already spiking. A computerized voice barked from the dispatch system. Structure fire, high rise, Westbridge Tower, multiple calls, reports of heavy smoke on the 27th floor. Captain Eva Rostova, a woman etched with the weariness and wisdom of 2 decades in the department, barked orders.
Engine 12, ladder 4, medic 7. Let's move. This is going to be a big one.
Westbridge Tower, a sleek glass and steel monolith, dominated the downtown skyline. As the engine screamed towards the scene, the plume of black smoke billowing from its upper floors painted a grim picture against the azure sky. Eva could feel the heat even blocks away. The news choppers were already circling like vultures, their cameras capturing the unfolding disaster. Arriving on the scene was a maelstrom of activity. Police barricades were going up, holding back a growing crowd of onlookers. Evacuees streamed out of the building's lobby, faces streaked with soot and terror. The air thrummed with the whine of sirens and the shouted commands of first responders. Eva's team, Engine 12, was tasked with fire suppression on the 25th to 27th floors. Ladder 4 was already extending its aerial ladder toward the blaze, attempting to rescue those trapped on balconies.
Okay, people, let's go. Standard gear check, SCBA's on, comms hot.
Eva yelled, her voice barely audible above the cacophony.
We're going in. Focus on containing the fire and evacuating anyone we find. Radio check every 5 minutes.
The lobby was a chaotic triage center. Firefighters helped coughing, disoriented people into the waiting arms of paramedics. The air stank of burnt plastic, acrid smoke, and the metallic tang of fear. Eva and her team, seasoned veterans like grizzled veteran Mike McAvoy and eager Beaver rookie Sarah Chen, pushed through the crowd and toward the stairwell. They ascended, burdened by the weight of their gear, the thick rubber of their boots pounding against the concrete steps. The air grew hotter with each floor, the smoke thicker, visibility diminishing to near zero. Reaching the 25th floor, they were met with an inferno. Flames licked at the ceiling, consuming everything in their path. Desks, chairs, computers, all were fuel for the ravenous fire. The heat was intense, even through their protective gear.
All right, team, spread out, search and suppress.
Eva commanded, her voice muffled by her SCBA mask. Mac and Sarah moved to the left, unrolling the high-pressure hose. Eva pushed forward, using her thermal imaging camera to scan the room. The camera painted a stark picture. Pockets of intense heat, smoldering debris, and flickering flames dancing like demonic sprites. They fought the fire with disciplined precision, the high-pressure water jets carving paths through the flames. The hissing steam momentarily cleared the air, offering brief glimpses of the devastation. They checked offices, cubicles, under desks, shouting, "Fire department, anyone here?" The office layout was a maze of partitions and corridors. They encountered pockets of trapped smoke, disoriented evacuees who had become lost in the confusion. Eva and her team guided them toward the stairwell, urging them to keep low to the ground and cover their mouths. As they advanced, Eva's thermal imager flickered. It painted several cool pockets amidst the sea of orange and red heat signatures of the blaze. She checked the spot of coolest place near the desk area where they previously was high flames. "I think is everything okay at here? We need to advance to the next floor now." David listened them searching for a way of the disaster. Are they actually living? Thought his chances decreased even more. His strength almost diminished, could only keep some tears from coming out. Only one chance. Wait or force it out and ask for salvation while losing everything. A painful choice that may impact every decision he makes further. What was it he gonna chose? A hope for saving something of a now burnt existence? He did his bet. He could still wait. With the area declared secured on 25th and 27th floor, they needed to change focus. The main core of the fire was now situated at the 28th, and spreading all up into the higher floors. Eva regrouped her team. "All right, team, we're making progress, but we need to move up to the 28th floor. That's where the real heat is." They pushed upwards, battling through the intense smoke and heat. On the 28th floor, they were met with a terrifying scene. The fire had breached the sprinkler system in some areas, creating a rain of soot-filled water that did little to quench the flames. The heat was palpable, melting the plastic of their face shields. Eva directed the hose team to focus on the fire's leading edge, preventing it from spreading further. She continued to sweep the area with her thermal imager, searching for any sign of life. The imager showed that the fire was concentrated in the central core of the building, around the ventilation shafts. Ladder 4 radioed in, reporting that they had rescued several people from the upper floors, but that the conditions were rapidly deteriorating. The structural integrity of the building was becoming a concern.
Command, this is Ladder 4. We're pulling back. Structural instability. Heavy fire on floors 30 and above. We're concerned about collapse.
The voice crackled over the radio. Eva felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. A high-rise fire was always a dangerous game, a gamble against time and the relentless force of the flames.
Engine 12, this is Command. We're ordering a partial evacuation. Focus on containing the fire and get out. Structural engineers are assessing the building.
Eva relayed the order to her team. They continued to fight the fire, but their movements were now focused on securing their retreat. They systematically swept the floors, double-checking every room, every office, every cubicle. Sarah Chen, eager to prove herself, was particularly thorough. She squeezed through narrow spaces, peered behind fallen debris, calling out, "Fire department! Is anyone here?" Mac, the grizzled veteran, was more pragmatic. He knew the limitations of their search. "We can't get everyone, kid. We do what we can and hope for the best." Eva, torn between the instinct to save lives and the need to protect her team, pushed herself relentlessly. She trusted her team. She also saw they didn't give the maximum. Meanwhile, back on the 26th floor, the sounds of movement above reached David's ears. Firefighters were on the 28th floor now. They would be working down. Any minute they could start checking out on that area where he was hidden. The smoke got a darker color as time went by. "Fire department, is anyone here?" At some point, David could recognize Sarah's Chen screaming nearby, but without hope. His choice was harder and harder, and his breath slower and slower, almost in eternal sleep. "Let's go, kid! We gotta get out of here!" Max shouted at Sarah from the end of the hall as firefighters finished up their inspection for any remaining survivors, they announced.
Command, this is Engine 12. Floors 25 through 28 cleared. Proceeding to evacuate.
Eva radioed, a note of weary relief in her voice. The evacuation was slow and arduous. They helped disoriented civilians down the smoke-filled stairwells, urging them to move quickly but cautiously. Outside, the scene was even more chaotic. The fire had drawn a massive crowd, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles painting the sky in a surreal, strobe-lit landscape. Paramedics rushed to treat the injured, the air thick with the sounds of sirens and the cries of the distressed. Firefighters emerged from the building, faces blackened with soot, eyes bloodshot and weary. Eva stood outside, watching the fire rage, a deep sense of unease gnawing at her gut. They had done everything they could, had followed procedure, had rescued as many people as possible, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ravaged cityscape, the fire began to subside. The firefighters continued to pour water on the flames, slowly but surely gaining control of the blaze. Later, after action started, David wakes up again, but now with almost nothing around him to hope from. Everything was dark and almost silent. How long had passed? No way to tell, but one sure thing. He got forgotten. Inhaling little pure air made him come back from sleep, in small, fresh current. It has been many hours past since the flames faded, and David's cough sounded from a dry, burning throat. "Help!" He was barely hearable, and so broken he may no longer resist at the end. "I am a Levy." Silence. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the smoke-filled sky in hues of orange and purple. The fire, though still smoldering in the building's core, was no longer the raging inferno it had been hours before. Firefighters, exhausted and covered in soot, continued to pour water on the embers, working to prevent any chance of reignition. Eva Rostova stood apart from the crew, her gaze fixed on the darkened windows of Westbridge Tower. She felt the weight of responsibility, the constant, gnawing worry that she hadn't done enough. The procedures had been followed, the search had been thorough, but the feeling lingered. Had someone been missed? Had a desperate cry gone unheard amidst the chaos? Back at the command post, a debriefing was underway. Fire chiefs, structural engineers, and investigators huddled around maps and diagrams, assessing the damage and strategizing the next steps. The structural integrity of the building was still a major concern. Parts of the upper floors were considered unstable, and the building was officially declared off-limits until a thorough assessment could be completed. Meanwhile, in the desolate darkness of the 26th floor, David coughed again, the sound rasping and weak. He pressed his hand against his mouth, trying to stifle the sound. His throat was raw, his lungs burning. He was parched, dehydrated, and disoriented. He didn't know how long he'd been unconscious, but the silence was unnerving. It was a silence punctuated only by the creaks and groans of the damaged building settling around him. "Help!" he whispered, the word barely audible. "Is anyone there?" The only response was the faint rustling of debris. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. He pushed himself up slowly, his head swimming. He was still in the cramped storage closet, surrounded by shelves laden with dusty boxes and forgotten files. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burnt paper. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy and weak. The screen flickered to life, revealing a single bar of battery and no signal. Useless. He cursed under his breath, the sound harsh in the silent room. He had to get out. Pushing against the shelves, he managed to force the closet door open. He staggered out into the ruined office space. The scene was one of devastation. Desks were overturned, chairs were shattered, and papers were scattered everywhere like fallen leaves. The air was thick with soot, obscuring the already dim light that filtered through the grimy windows. He navigated the debris-strewn floor, his legs wobbly and uncertain. He called out again, his voice hoarse, but there was no response. He tried to orient himself, but the familiar layout of the office was unrecognizable in the chaos. He remembered the stairwell, the frantic rush of people trying to escape. That was his only chance. He stumbled towards where he thought the stairwell should be, his hand trailing along the scorched walls. He coughed, hacking up black phlegm. The smoke was still thick, stinging his eyes and constricting his throat. Reaching the stairwell, he found the door warped and jammed. He pushed against it with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. Panic started to set in. He was trapped. He looked around desperately for something to use as a tool, anything to pry the door open. His eyes fell on a heavy metal fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. He grabbed it, his hands trembling, and swung it against the door with all his might. The extinguisher slammed against the metal with a resounding clang. The door shuddered but remained closed. He swung again and again, his arms aching, his lungs burning. Finally, with a groan of protesting metal, the door popped open. He stumbled through, coughing and gasping for air. The stairwell was dark, filled with the acrid smell of burnt plastic and wet ash. He started down the steps, his legs shaking with each step. He reached the 25th floor, and then the 24th, his progress agonizingly slow. The lower floors were less damaged, but the air was still thick with smoke. He could hear the distant sounds of activity outside, the hum of generators and the murmur of voices. Hope flickered within him. On the ground floor, the lobby was a scene of organized chaos. Cleanup crews were hauling out debris, while structural engineers were examining the building's support beams. The air was still thick with the smell of smoke, but it was cleaner, fresher than the air upstairs. As David emerged from the stairwell, blinking in the harsh light, he was immediately noticed. A cleanup crew member stared at him, his jaw dropping. "Hey, whoa, hold on there. Where did you come from?" the man asked, his voice laced with surprise and concern. David just stood there, swaying slightly, his face covered in soot, his clothes torn and blackened. He looked like a ghost risen from the ashes. I was trapped," he managed to croak, his voice barely audible. "On the 26th floor." The cleanup worker immediately radioed for help. Within moments, paramedics were swarming around David, checking his vital signs, giving him oxygen. He was disoriented and dehydrated, but miraculously, he seemed to have suffered no serious injuries. Eva Rostova, who was supervising the cleanup efforts, rushed over, her eyes widening in disbelief.
What's going on?
She asked, her voice sharp with concern. Captain, this man. He says he was trapped on the 26th floor, a paramedic said, pointing to David. Eva stared at David, her mind reeling. They had cleared those floors. They had swept every room, every office. How could they have missed him? He says he was in some type of hideout on the floor, but also says it was more closed up than expected, paramedics added. Looking up for confirmation if they can leave the location? The cleanup work suddenly stopped when it has confirmed all info and could proceed with transfer to the hospital unit. Eva looked up to command.
We got a miscount.
She claimed via intercom channel. She heard many murmurs and many negative answers confirming their work. No way they could have miscalculated every room for an eventual remain. A small glimpse from David showed up, and some of his skin became clearer to look. It was a clear signal. Dark skin. And small shock surged among Eva's mind with no control.
The building has declared out from every kind of persons months ago after multiple rumors around the city due to budget. Can you believe any survivor or victim may know or believe what happens here? Or if somebody has been seen or hidden after us when the alarm went on? Was hearable clearly between internal communication. The survivor is telling only nonsense nobody believed and ignored it. The fire also got so intense there will no sure survivors for many hours from now. It could cause amnesia if you survived there at least, like said. Nothing he claims has any validation from sources, nor our equipment showed sign or voice of one.
They transferred quickly David to an hospital in the near where he was taking the care. However, inside the van of transfer, a black police car stopped suddenly. The car and the black policemen rushed near the area, taking by the shoulders and changing the medical equipment over in police-restricted black van. Paramedics could not react, but let it go after confirmation. With nothing to hold back now, that image took inside Eva that will haunt his entire career. Black man forced with unknown police. From inside his office that the chief stared at Eva, who only confirmed with small silent steps the recent happenings and ignored with gestures to leave at them now. Meanwhile, inside black van, David asked over and over again, what did they were taking at him and who was at side? Everything he obtained was silenced, every questions asked. The van increased speed to unknown location in short of seconds, and his vision diminished. The news that evening reported the successful containment of the fire at Westbridge Tower, praising the heroic efforts of the firefighters. They mentioned the few people who had been rescued, but there was no mention of David. No one believed him anyway. His existence erased and shadowed. Eva Rostova watched the news report, her face etched with worry. She couldn't shake the image of the man being loaded into the ambulance, the lost, confused look in his eyes. Something didn't add up. Why would somebody hide there if he may be injured and get nobody to assist? How the alarm start affected his mind. How has it affected his judgment? Why was it like nobody ever asked nor knew? A small policeman rushed on scene and went directly near the van with some high-ranked policemen that just stared his watch and said that everything looked fine and to advance. What could possibly be inside the case? They weren't supposed to know. If police were to investigate it, they were silenced after it. Just don't ask, act normal.
If I don't ask, surely they have to ask and investigate. There should be someone missing if has already had someone,
thought Eva over her mind. That's how the police car left the location where it picked David. Later on that at the hospital, in a separate area, near Westbridge's fire event, David suddenly wakes up but is being restrained in a room, completely locked room. As he looks and sees for an exist, he can clearly read, "Do all precautions."
Project Terminus, the New Horizon patient N1. Under strict monitoring due fire, heat damage, short of air, and potential loss of short-mid memory at all.
He looks confused. How much do you feel it is true? Was writing there. There's anything to lose, right? He thoughts to keep up, resist, or at last wait. The rest has already been written and lost from his old vision. Could resist till the very end or gave it all in. The man in front of him suddenly started hearing voices. That was the sign. The ending was near. What should be happen further? Did he escape at least something? Was every loss just something to come, at least for him, a new horizon? What that words does mean, where has ended David? Everything it comes after remains, to every human imagine.